So, welcome everyone to another conversation with a lovely practitioner. And today I have a pleasure of speaking with Jane Dancey, who is embodiment coach, somatic yoga teacher, among many different roles and modalities that she's trained in. So, thank you, Jane, and welcome to this podcast.
Thank you, Anita, for inviting me. Thank you so much.
Lovely to connect with you in here. And so I know a little bit about you, Jane, just a little tiny bit. And we had the conversations before, and it's, you've done a lot of different trainings. There are a lot of different modalities that you studied. And I know that you've been a teacher, teaching yoga for over 20 years and alongside of other things and working in biopsychosocial approach. So I think it would be really great to hear a little bit more about your journey um, from when you started training and maybe working in this way and your own practice as well. And then to this point in time, I think it would be really interesting to kind of get a little bit more understanding around it.
Right. Okay. Well, that was about coming up to 20 years ago. I started studying yoga, and my introduction to yoga came about going to just a normal gym and discovering that exercise was actually felt really good. Previous to that, I had avoided exercise like the plague. I was always the one not going to PE at school, and I joined a local gym and I started doing step classes. I didn't want anyone to know that I was doing it. I was really mortified by the thought of anyone seeing me do it, but I started doing this movement and it felt really, really good. And at that gym, it was a little local gym in Covent Garden, in London, and it was the community gym. And someone started doing yoga classes there, and there was something about it that really instantly felt right for me. And I started becoming quite curious about it. And following on from that, I had a number of health crises. I had an ectopic pregnancy, and it was it's a very traumatic time. And like so often that happens with a crisis, it created a lot of change. It was my gateway to a lot of change. So I gave up my career in TV production. I moved out of London. I moved to the Sussex coast and started doing yoga a lot more. And quite following from that, I found a British Wheel of Yoga training course and started from there. And around that time, I also had my daughter, who's now coming up to 18. So that was my journey in, and I all the way back when I was going to yoga classes in Hastings, where I was, it was Scaravelli yoga. So I'm very grateful for that introduction into yoga as a very gentle, very explorative type of movement. And then since then, I've explored all sorts of different types of yoga, and I've come all the way back, actually, back to that type, like Scaravelli, but also via a lot of other somatic practices and embodiment and discovering things like Feldenkrais and thinking, oh my God, this is amazing. So I've always been very curious. Whatever I'm doing, I start looking around it and underneath it and around the back of it. And I'm just quite a curious person. So lots of tangents I've gone on to.
I love that. I love that. It's amazing, isn't it? This journey that you just shared, starting from one point. For you, it was the Scaravelli yoga and then learning lots of different stuff and then coming back almost to the beginning, but obviously being completely different with lots of different insights and knowledge. And there is something that, when we talked last time, we were talking a little bit about disembodied yoga. And the interesting thing in here is yesterday in one of the yoga teacher groups on social media, somebody created this post about somatic and the use of somatic and somatic yoga, and that it's another hype word and asking question, how do people understand it? And I thought this is such an amazing question, because we do, rather than shy away from it, we need to have those conversations, and we do need to really delve deeper into, the practices that we are doing and our understanding what we understand by the words like embodiment or somatic, and our approaches to yoga, and whether they, because yoga is a somatic practice, it's a body focused practice. Every yoga is a somatic practice from that perspective, from that meaning. But not all of yoga that we practice leads to more embodiment and more connection, or maybe even, nervous system regulation and feeling more at ease within who you are and how you are and within your practice and your life. And so, I know that one of the things that we were talking about is that you teach somatic yoga. And I would love to just kind of hear from you, what's all of that about, for people who are still questioning, like what is somatic yoga? What is somatics?
Well, it's such a an interesting question, because we all, I'm really interested in language, and I'm interested in how language lands somatically, meaning how it lands in one's body and how one translates that. The word somatic and embodiment is thrown about a lot. They're quite key words right now. It used to be that they were definitely not. And there is quite also a lot of confusion around them, because they're not words that we might be used to using. And I do think that everyone has their own definition of it in some ways. And I could Google. If I Googled the definition of somatic or embodiment, I would come up with many different versions of it. So I use somatic. My meaning of somatic yoga is that it is there are it's there are a big chunk of the practice is allowing the body to lead. So if we think of like freedom and form-based yoga, like maybe Iyengar, put your right foot here. It's precise. It's about learning a technique, and it's pretty cognitive, thinking a lot. Freedom-based is more, if I'm on the ground, I'm curious to where my body wants to go first. And that can be a really challenging way to practice for a lot of people. And it was for me. So after years and years of doing, bog standard British wheel of yoga, Anusara, what have you, kind of types, my practice was pretty disembodied. My teacher would tell me what to do, and then I would tell my students what to do. And that was the right way because they had told me, and they were right because they were it was a hierarchy. It's pretty patriarchal. So for me, it came to a point where I started, it's like I had an inner rebellion to all of that, like very much a body rebellion. And also like, I was thinking, hang on a minute, that's not right. That didn't feel right because alongside I was studying psychotherapy and embodiment. And all of that was being very challenged by those teaching. So going back to somatic yoga, as I might go off on a tangent, because it's, it's such a big subject.
And all is welcome here.
Yeah. So if I having a giving oneself time and space in which to explore the movement, the intuitive movement of the body. And I mean, when I call it somatic yoga, I'm pulling in various pieces to it. And I'm really influenced by body mind centering, by authentic movement, by Feldenkrais and Alexandra technique, and all sorts of other what would be known as somatic movement, almost more of a therapeutic application of it. And it's constantly morphing and becoming something else. It's not static.
I love that. Yeah, completely. And this is what I love about somatic practices. Somatic movement. It's because it's so coming from within, because it's so intuitive, because it's about meeting yourself where you are at, within your needs or within your wants, and then following it. There is no other way but for it to keep changing. And it's keep transforming. And I think one of the things that you said, and I can relate so much to, it's this, that so many, when I think about what's the biggest challenge for yoga students to move from being a student practicing in the class to then practicing at home, is this the way that most of us been taught about following the teacher standing at the front of the class, showing how the posture should look, giving us verbal cues, which then takes us away from actually tuning into the body and understanding, well, how can I do this pose in a way that is right for me? Or maybe not even do that pose. Maybe, having that permission of not just saying this is not the right pose for me as I am feeling today. And one of the things that, I always notice is this, sometimes people can say, teachers or practitioners can say all the right things, like trust your body, or, follow your inner rhythm. But they never really explain what it means. They don't teach their students what it means. And also the other thing is about, you don't have, here are a couple of versions. This is less intense. That is more intense. And then showing the most intense one always, as advanced pose. And there is this real disconnection between what's being said, listen to your body, and then this is the right way of doing it.
Absolutely. And it's all very top down.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's very linear. And there is so much potential for a complete bypass of the bodily based intelligence. And but going back to the somatic yoga, but I just wanted also to bring into it that there are the other practices like Feldenkrais and also things like Hana Somatics, which are not there is kind of a freedom element to it, but there's also quite a lot of form. They're form-based exercises, but they're very, very slow, very repetitive. And for a yoga practitioner who's used to, sun salutations and this and that, and it might seem very odd, and might question, why am I doing this? It's slow, it's repetitive. Like I'm thinking like Hana Somatics. But it's a sort of it's kind of dropping down beneath just the physical layer of the body. It's working on nervous system and neurological aspects.
Fascia.
Yeah. It's I would say it's a much more intelligent way of working with the body. And what the danger of what we have right now is that because somatic and embodiment have become buzzwords, what I see is a lot of yoga practitioners just putting those words on a normal practice. So they might say it's somatic yoga, but it's yoga with like what you said, Annette, about those phrases that get thrown about. Follow your rhythm. Do what feels right for you. You know, if I say do what feels right for you, if I'm not sure about who I'm teaching and where they are with it, I will put a caveat and say, and that might be really challenging, or you might find yourself thinking, well, I don't know what to do. There might be a complete disconnection. So there's steps to that. Just follow whatever you want to do, or you know, those phrases like open up your heart.
I love those.
What?
There are some really funny things that the teachers
Positive
say.
energy.
Yes, I mean, I love it, and maybe because English is not my first language, sometimes I'm like, what does that mean exactly?
Yeah. I mean, when I started studying embodiment with Mark Walsh, he was very strict on the language that we would use, and I really appreciate that now. Like we would really get told off if we use the word energy without a specific, tangible meaning of what that meant in that specific moment.
Yeah.
Because there are these words that land differently with everyone. And for a lot of people, it just won't land. And then that creates division.
Yeah. Yes, I think there are so many words that we use. You know, language is challenging in itself because we think that we use the same words and we mean, you know, we understand it in the same way. But they can be very, very challenging, especially if somebody is new to the practice. I mean, I loved Mark clarity around language, and he's very nonsense. You know, there isn't this like he's the total opposite of this kind of love and light language that you know, sometimes is being used within the community.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things, you know, when it comes down to accessibility and working with trauma, it's this kind of explanation of what do you mean? Because if that's missing, that psychoeducational part, this kind of real tangible way of understanding that somebody can relate to, because if we don't do it in that way, it adds to that level of distress or level of disconnection that somebody is already experiencing. And, you know, over the last 3 years and everything that is happening in the world, many of us have got this heightened level of stress and anxiety, often just underneath the surface. I mean, I can speak for myself, you know, that I feel it just underneath the surface. It's always present. It's always there. Sometimes it's more conscious and I think about it. And most of the time it's just that layer of anxiety that I'm aware of within my physiology. And so all of those practices, you know, are so powerful that can really, really help us in navigate through those challenging times, but they are only useful, really useful, if they are shared or practiced in a certain kind of way. And one of those things, you know, it's like we mentioned the biopsychosocial approach. And I'd love you to say a few words about that. I mean, I was trained in that when I was working in social care. So, but I think from that perspective of the work that you do, it would be really great to hear. How do you bring that into your work?
Yeah, thank you, Glenn. So I think I had started doing it through studying embodiment and psychotherapy around the same time. So I was very interested in how the psychological layer was interacting with the physical layer, and through embodiment, understanding like my home environment was influenced my embodiment, my heritage, my culture, my community, all these different layers of that influence one's embodiment. Um, and I think it was I I went through a phase of studying with Peter Blackaby, a yoga teacher, and I absolutely love his work. And he would talk a lot about pain and um, how people experienced it, and he used that phrase biopsychosocial, and it was just a light bulb moment of it wasn't a phrase that I'd never heard because I didn't come from that background where it's used all the time. And it was just oh yeah, that makes so much sense. The biopsychosocial. And then I would think, yes, and the spiritual and
Yes.
the cultural and the this and the that and how they all swim through and weave through each other and really cannot be separated. And so when we look through that lens, we have more of an understanding and actually a capacity to cultivate a little bit more empathy about ourselves and about others. Of like, I get that. I can see where that's coming through. More understanding, a bit more clarity on it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I so resonate with what you just said. You know, you cannot separate those different things. I know in our Western society, we like to, because we live within the Cartesian approach, you know, I think, therefore I am, and the power of the mind. And the mind likes things in separate boxes and the labels. And so a lot of, you know, the systems within we live in are separate. Like there is mental health and physical health. And, you know, this is spirituality. This is all of that. But we know from our experience that it's impossible to separate it. Anybody who lives with pain will tell you very clearly how it impacts their mental health and their relationships and the rest of their life, and vice versa. And I
Mhm.
think it's, you know, what comes up for me when I hear you say that, it's that it's much more balanced and holistic approach and much more feminine,
Mm,
isn't it? It's like as women, more we tend to more embrace um our experience and other people's experience in a much more this kind of whole system understanding and relating. And I know that you do a lot of work with women. I know that we talked
mm,
about perimenopause yoga and the work that you do with women around coaching and embodiment. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
mm. Um, Yeah, and I think my work with women and exploring the feminine has originates from my own exploration of it. Um, I, as a youngster, I was a tomboy. So for anyone who doesn't know what tomboy is, it's not used that much these days, but I very much um, wanted to be like a boy. I really wanted my name to be something like Georgina, so I could shorten it to George. I had an older brother, so there was that kind of dynamic. But I, for, for a long time, I wanted to wear boys' clothes, and so when I kind of came out of that and started exploring more sort of feminine aspects, there was quite a difficulty. Um, and I think like the word woman, I would kind of shy away from. And it's only in my sort of my 40s and then coming into my 50s that I've really started to embrace it and explore it. And also because I've got a daughter and I've witnessed her go through menarche, through puberty, and coming into young womanhood and being very interested in rites of passage in a way of like realizing how what I would have liked at that age of going through puberty, and how I could potentially offer it to her. And for a while, I ran girls groups and things like that, and it's kind of cascaded from that, exploring all these strands to it, and I was thinking earlier when we were talking about biopsychosocial, I was thinking, yeah, and
Yes.
political, and sexism, gender, misogyny, all of those aspects that swim around us. Um, and so it has gone from there. And I've really, I love the the offer of women's circles. I love to sit in circle, and I really, it's one of the something that I love to facilitate myself. I think it's so potent and so valuable, to offer that in community. Really, really needed. And yeah, and just exploring it as a sort of almost like an art form of like exploring the feminine of what does that mean, and how does that translate, and as I go through it, and as I'm getting older myself, I'm now 54, and uh, I feel much more standing in my own power, and I feel more vocal about what I want to call out, and more political. And what happens around me is very much very much influences what I do. And I never want to separate. For me, I can't separate my embodiment from what is going on in the world. It's for me, it's interlinked, very much so.
Yeah, I can so relate to what you just said. It cannot be any other way. The more you are connected, the more you are embodied, the more you understand what's going on for you, the more you resonate with what's going on with others and around the world. And it almost like, I always think, because I just turned 50 this year, and I kind of thought one of the gifts of, you know, coming to 50 and going through perimenopause and then going into menopause is this gift of not giving a you know not worrying so much about what other people will say, and really understanding that there isn't that much time. Like, if you're going to speak up, you've got to speak up now. If you're going to name something, you can't waste your time anymore. There isn't, like, when you are in your 20s and you might think, oh yeah, focus on that later, I've got lots of time. One of the gifts of getting older is just this understanding of, well, time is limited. And I, you know, I need to walk my talk. I need to speak up. I need to say something. And as women, women's roles within our society, um, the history of women standing for women's rights. In one of the modules of the training that I run for female practitioners, we look at the history of circles. We look at how women used to protest and show up and for women's rights, and that actually women being able to own a home or own a property or have a job or have their own money. It hasn't been that long within the history of our society. So all of this is ongoing. So no wonder that it becomes political. No wonder that we as women take those, that we find our voices to actually speak up for what's important.
Mm.
And this is why, and I'm sure you agree with that, this is why embodiment is so important. It's not just for us, for, oh, it's nice, I'm going to feel at ease, I'm going to feel less depressed or anxious. but actually it is for everybody. It is for our children, it is for our loved ones, it is for our communities, for the world, really. So the more we become embodied, the more we can, the more we relate to others in a different way, the different choices we make, that, that kind of ripple effect or dandelion effect is always happening. So I wondered if I could ask, have you seen any changes within mm, the women's embodiment over the last few years? Is there anything that kind of stood out for you?
In that I see happening around me. Oh, there's what you've just said. Like, brought up so much for me. I think I see a lot of offerings with feminine embodiment. I see that's really rising up, which is good. I don't know what they're like. I don't know what the content is like. When I teach, at the end, I normally do a checking in and a checking out. And when I say how you doing, I and sometimes when appropriate, I say, you might not feel better, you might not feel okay, you might feel worse, and that's okay, because when we work from a somatic embodied perspective, we're revealing, and it's not always pretty. And that is okay. I think there is that idea that we have to, we come to yoga and we feel great afterwards, which doesn't do these deep, profound practices the justice that what they can do. And I shy away from the word love and light. And they also, the word light worker. I've had people say, you're a light worker. And it doesn't sit with me. I think, no, I work with light. I work with the light, and I also work with the dark. I work with the shadow. And I think there is such a bypass of the shadow. So what I'm hoping is that with all the embodiment, the feminine embodiment work that's coming out, I hope that they are really holding the shadow there, because that's really, really essential. And very much so at this time where we find ourselves politically, from an ecological perspective, we've got to look at the shadow. I know that I'm at this point in my life and my work where I'm not here to be nice and to make myself popular. And I'll probably, then I'm never gonna. I'm not. My posts aren't to create lots of followers and for people to like me. I want to come from my heart and what feels right, and that might not land well with some people, and that's okay. And I think these authentic voices are really needed. And when I wish for more authentic voices, I want to hear authentic voices that maybe I don't agree with, and that's okay. And being able to hold that and not having to agree with everything, and everything's got to be nice and in my group. Otherwise, I other them and I push them away. But to be able to hold that tension of disagreement and just having different thought processes.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I love what you just said. I'm not here to be liked or, wanting to have lots of followers. And I always think it's like, what for? What do you want all of those followers for? Like, that just really triggered this thought. I was sharing that the other day with some of the groups that I hold. It's like I received this message saying, we're gonna send you 100 great leads a month. And I was like, what the hell am I gonna do with them? It's like, I don't want 100 leads. I haven't got time and I haven't got motivation. I want 3 or 5 women that I could connect with. That's more valuable than actually, having followers. Or there is so much stuff out there, especially within the sphere of social media, that is being pumped up and hyped up and is being shown as something to aspire to. And, you know, and one of the things that is so interesting is this difference, and I don't know whether you've seen it for yourself, the difference between the yoga community and the coaching community, and how differently within those two communities, for example, their attitude to money or their attitude to business, like running a sustainable business, because if you're self-employed, you effectively are, you know, a business owner, really. And it's really quite interesting looking through those two different lenses and how they approach, you know, showing up, running the business, engaging with others, what are the kind of priorities. And obviously I'm talking about the extremes. There is a middle ground here that we can kind of you know, follow and find for ourselves. But I don't know whether you can relate, whether you've seen
Yeah.
stuff like that happening um, in your
I think
experience.
in the yoga world, there's quite a lot of bypassing around talking openly about money, um, about receiving money. Um, it's it's a bit sort of clandestine. It's a bit under the surface. People, and I think I've been through this myself, and it's still something that I work with, like my approach to money and being centered and comfortable when someone says, "What's your rate? How much do you charge?" And when someone doesn't pay me, saying, can you pay me, please?" And being open and direct, and it being okay with me, and not thinking I'm going to offend someone. Like this, there's so much around money. And also there's this great belief that it's a bit dirty to talk about money because we're doing a spiritual practice, maybe. There's so much there. And then there are, what I notice is there's so many um, business coaching courses, very much tailored towards women, whether they're coaching or yoga, they kind of cross over, but they're big bucks, and they're like, you'll get this and you'll get that. And it's, I can almost feel there's part of me going, "Oh, maybe I should be doing that." And then realizing that's the old paradigm. That's patriarchy. That's too much, too soon, too fast. What's that? That's the definition of trauma.
Yes.
What about slow marketing, or slow business?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm all about, Jay. Slow marketing, nervous system friendly. So much of it out there is just so hyped up and manic and unsustainable and scarcity based and ah, lots of
Yeah,
stuff.
and I
Yeah.
absolutely, and I have a big scarcity thing that has been running through my life decades, and I'm really aware of it, and I work with it, and I work with it, and I work with it, and so I have really explored this, and I have a deep need to be honest. You know, like today I was due to run a winter solstice event online, and I've cancelled it because I didn't have enough people book on. And that's how it is, and it's okay.
Yeah.
Um, I think what I see in out there is that a lot of people find that's really a hard thing to be with, or to, if they say that out loud, they will be perceived as a failure. Um, and And that in itself, if I am pretending to be something that I am not, then that takes a bit of a battering on my nervous system.
Yeah.
And I'm all for the opposite, like, comfort and being okay with being okay with when things don't go quite to plan.
Yeah. And they don't go to plan so often, don't they?
Yeah.
Like if you've been alive for 50 years or plus, you know that, often things don't go according to plan. And that's okay. That's part of the learning and part of growing and part of healing. But this is so important. And I wanted to mention it because if we are talking about embodiment, that's part of our embodiment. It's like yourself, I've been exploring stuff around money, and this real shift about understanding that this is just a resource. And it can be such a great resource, if we have it as a resource, and then we can use it for so many great things. And there is something in me that, as a woman who's 50 years old and proudly, that rebels against just some people, usually men, who don't have very clear ethical behaviors, holding on to that very valuable resource that then could be used in other ways. And so, yeah, but it's a challenge, isn't it, to find this middle ground in between not grasping too much and not kind of feeling very powerless around it and confused and overwhelmed, but really find your path in a way that really feels authentic and feels like you're doing things in integrity and feeling like you're supported and you're supporting others, and with all the different roles that we play. And it's just such a complex, big thing being a woman in today's society.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I instantly know when I'm not being authentic to myself. It's sort of, it's a real physical discomfort. And so I actively, probably to the detriment of my career, I won't go there. Before TV and yoga, I studied fashion for years. I went to St. Martin's, I did women's wear. I was really so into that world. And it was such a cutthroat, inauthentic world. And it kind of chewed me up and spat me out, really. And I kind of spat myself out, actually, because there was a point where I just thought, I cannot be with this. It's inauthentic, but it's unethical. It was excess and bravado of like, look at me, I'm really cool. And that was one of the things that I loved about yoga when I first discovered it, because one of the first things I thought, oh, everyone's so nice and friendly after, fashion and then TV. Everyone's just nice and uncomplicated, friendly, and it's cool. But then as yoga has progressed through these last 2 decades, it's become something quite different. And there is a lot of that bravado, and using sex to sell, using one's own imagery to sell a product. And I get that, if someone's coming for me for coaching, of course they will be interested to see me and see who I am, and maybe what pictures there are, and getting a sense of who I am. But I hope it's not because I look a certain way. It's sort of, it really goes against the grain, but it's rife in the. And I suppose in some ways we are attracted to, there's faces that kind of draw us close and move us away. There's a lot in the face, sort of thinking like sort of nervous system, that social nervous system all around the front of the face, and there's lots going on. But what I see in yoga is something quite different. It's sort of, dare I say, sort of very glamorized, of like selling an idea of like, look at me, this is pretty good. Would you like a bit?
Yeah. Yeah, I really hear that. I really, really hear that. And it really just, yeah. I remember, I think it was last year or maybe a couple of years ago now. I remember I haven't been on Instagram for quite a while. And then I went on Instagram, and it's like suddenly I started seeing all these videos and postures photos of people doing yoga that was quite sexualized. And I was just like, what the hell is going on? And I remember posting on Facebook, I was like, is it just me, or is it like, it's kind of changed since I've been, on Instagram? And somebody said, oh, it depends who you follow. And I was like, well, I haven't followed anybody for a very long time. It's still showing what it was, but it just felt so different. And it just reminds me of all the kind of marketing. I think this is why, I talk quite a bit about this. It's like we can be such conscientious practitioners when we work with others. We can be even very conscientious and, somatically and embodiment focused when it comes down to our self-care. And somehow when it comes to marketing and promotion, all of that gets scrapped and we try to squeeze ourselves into this completely different set of values. And, I found it fascinating when I was researching stuff about marketing, how it came about, and that it was Sigmund Freud's nephew who just, started devising this psychology of marketing. And, psychologists say, well, people are easy to manipulate. Let's manipulate them and let's move them away from this needs based, like this is what you need, into desires. This is what you want. Doesn't matter that you have what you need, but if you want this, have some of this and it will be so much better. And the whole marketing and most of the marketing is really based around that. And, it goes around, I mean, I'm guilty of it as well. The amount of training courses I attended in the last 25 years, it's this kind of wanting more and needing more rather than actually pausing and thinking, well, how am I going to implement it? And maybe I need to pause to actually integrate it all. And this constant, and part of it is amazing. I love learning, and I don't think I will ever stop because it's for me, it's very exciting, and it just lands so well, and really, I love learning. But I think so often it's this disconnection from, let's do it a bit slower. Let's pace it a little bit more. Let's have time for integration rather than jumping to a new thing. Let's see how, we can do marketing in a way that is aligned with our values in other areas of our life, in the work that we do, in our personal life, in our self-care. Because I really believe you can do that. Maybe you won't grow so fast. Maybe you won't have lots of followers. And, my question here is, do you need those followers, really? I mean, what are they? Why are they following you? Unless you want to be a guru, what's the point? But really finding that way of actually talking a little bit more about this. I guess maybe because as we are recording this podcast, we are coming to the end of the year and it's everywhere, with this energy of plan for the next year. Make it better, make it your best year ever, make it this big thing. And, straight away, my nervous system is ramping up into this sympathetic response of, yeah, yeah. Oh, I totally get that. Oh, it's very interesting. And really, everything that we've been talking about, back to embodiment. Like if our intention is to really become more present, like for myself, with myself, me with you, me with the loved ones, me with people that I work with and other practitioners, and, contributing to something larger within the world, within the communities and the world, then it has to start really, with me.
Absolutely.
Always.
When you were saying that, I was thinking, like the more work I do with the nervous system, it's like being authentic, being real to myself, staying with that embodied self. That if I notice that I'm going into nervous system dysregulation, I know it's not the right thing. So if I see a course spring up on my screen saying, do this, great coaching, get those amount of clients, and I can feel a forward and maybe I need to do that scrabbling. That's a really good indicator that I've gone a little bit into sympathetic, and that's not good. That's not aligned. So it's doing finding things that are really land well in the body, and don't put us out of that. And that hunger for having to do this, or that society says you've got to be successful. You've got to, it's like this, there's a phrase like the rushing woman syndrome, and that, oh, I'm so busy. I'm so busy. Like I might see a friend in the street and she'll go, "Oh, I'm so busy. I've got this to do and I've got that to do." And I always think about this, and I think there's no real, what is the opposite of like, I'm so busy? What would you say? I'm so relaxed. I'm so not busy. I can't even think of a phrase because it's not used. It's not valued. Of like, I've got hardly anything on. It would be something completely different.
Yeah, I really hear what you're saying.
Much.
Yeah.
It's all of those little pieces that are still feeding into that linear production, keep it going, work it for the man, don't question it, shut up and get going. Then I think, hang on a minute. No.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I have a feeling we could stay here for another few hours chatting about all of this. There is so much here to unpick, but I wanted to say thank you so much, Jane. I really enjoyed chatting with you today. And I wanted to ask if people wanted to follow up and see what you're doing, and maybe some other events that you are doing, or some other offerings, and connect with you. How can they find you?
Yeah. So I am, my website's janedancey.com. I'm on Instagram, Jane Dancey Somatic Coach, and I'm on Facebook. Yeah, so they can contact me through all of those ways.
Okay, lovely. Thank you so much, Jane, for taking time chatting with me today,
Thank
for
you.
joining me. Thank you.